Thinking of KUEST leadership, I wanted to invite you guys into the process of helping us continue to grow the KUEST network. We really believe in the impact that the KUEST model has on the local church and just on students in general, reaching back as far as we can to impact them. And so I want to invite you, if you know of other churches or other organizations that are interested in becoming a part of the KUEST Kids leadership model, we'd love to talk with them, love to bring them on board and get them connected to this network. Also, KUEST World, in case you haven't heard about that, is an initiative that we have to reach kids in at-risk regions around the world with the opportunity to be a part of a KUEST Kids leadership program. And what we want to try to do is we do through partnerships is we make these resources available for free for those ministries, those organizations that can't afford them. And that includes places here in the States. So it's stateside as well as right now English-speaking regions. We're hoping in the future to get our materials translated to other languages so we can reach further. But for right now, if you know of missionaries, if you know of pastors who live in areas where just impoverished or could not afford to be a KUEST church normally, we'd love the opportunity to support them and our sponsors to make these materials available for free, so you can let us know that. Also, this part, the KUEST Student Leadership Collaborative, this is something a little bit new that we've just launched into, and I'm really excited about it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the next session that we'll do just like this. But this is something we really see grow. So we just encourage you as we head or into the next collaborative that we'll do in August to reach out and invite people to come alongside of you. You can either huddle together there in the room or they can join by Zoom. And we'll see how Zoom works out. Zoom is supposed to be able to handle up to hundreds of people at a time. But we may have to go to a different technology once we get to that point. But we'll work on that. So we'll solve those issues, no problem. But invite people, get them connected. We really believe that the more people we have around the table, stronger we can get in reaching the next generation. So that's some of what's going to happen today. And so in August, I'm excited. We're going to talk about culture, talk about 5 barriers to establishing culture and how to break through those barriers. One of the greatest opportunities we have in establishing the next generation is to build culture into our current teams. And it's a big task. Sometimes if you have to shift culture, especially, it can be really challenging. But there are ways that you can break through, ways that you can set culture, and you can begin setting it not only in your leadership team, but also in the students that you serve. So excited about those things. You can learn all about that stuff at KUEST.org, KUEST.org. And that's kind of our landing page for all the different aspects of KUEST that we offer. So with that in mind, we're going to jump right into the subject today, 7 things that effective student ministries must do to connect with the next generation. And we're going to walk through some statistics, look at some trends, things that are going on right now and among our students, trending in our society. Then we're going to talk about 7 things that we can do to be even more effective. So what I ask you to do as we go through this is if you have questions or thoughts, write them down, and we'll save all those for the end. I'm going to go through the presentation relatively quickly and then save some time for conversation at the end. So if you have questions, things come up, write them down. Make sure you don't write them down so you don't lose that thought or a thought you want to share. Just make sure you capture that because you won't remember 4 minutes from now. And we want to make sure we get to all that stuff. So let's jump right into it. 7 things. Let's look at some statistics here of some trends that we see currently. Specifically, a lot of these are going to lean a little media, but there are 5 areas I want to look at. I want to look at social media use, personal technology. I want to look at relational trends, spirituality, and education. And we're going to look at how are these things trending with our students today. So let's look at social media use. So social media use is trending up, as you might have guessed. No real surprise there. But let's look at how it's trending up. Today, social media, social networking is the #1 activity on the web. So what's really interesting about this is that websites are actually becoming less and less important for business. So from a business perspective, it's not quite as important to have a nice website as it is to be very socially networked through social media. So it's becoming it's the #1 activity on the web. Also, there are 5 million users under the age of 10. That's pretty amazing when you think about it. The kids under the age of 10, 5 million of them are connected to social networking. We know that 72% of teens have a networking profile. Think about that, 72%. So 77, a little over 7 out of 10 of students in your student ministry have a networking profile, and possibly even kids under 10 years old. And 47% of those that have a social networking profile are viewable by anyone. Now, there's a whole host, and we're not going to go into it right now, but there's a whole host of information connected to crimes and sexual crimes and so on that's associated with this statistic that's pretty crazy, and things that we need to be aware of that our students are dealing with. Instagram and Snapchat are king. Facebook is fading among students, and this is why. Students, Facebook, we're understanding the trend is toward the older generation now. Mom and dad are kind of taking over Facebook, and the kids don't like it. They don't want to be there anymore. In fact, this is what one kid said in a recent interview about Facebook, and specifically he said this. He said that Facebook is an awkward family dinner you can't leave. Pretty amazing. So that's how kids are feeling about it now. They're seeing mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and aunt and uncle on there, and they're not interested in being there anymore. Also interesting, that same interview, another young person said about Snapchat. They said that what they loved about Snapchat was that they could be themselves. So they could be real, share how they really feel, and then it was gone. They didn't have to worry about it hanging out and somebody doing something with it or coming back. They could just boop, get it out there, and then it would go away. So it's pretty interesting how those trends are kind of shifting a little bit. Let's talk about personal technology. So personal technology, here's what we know. 75% of teens, so again, 7 out of 10 teens in your student ministries, between 12 and 17 own their own cell phone, have their own cell phone. They're actually using those for these top 5 uses: texting, photos, exchanging photos, playing music, and recording videos. And so just things that we need to be aware of is that this is how our kids are communicating. So let's look real quickly at relational trends. What's interesting is research is showing us that relationships are trending cyber. So relationships are still being built. Friendships, relationships are relationships. But things are starting to trend cyber. What does that mean? Well, that means that 201 is the average number of friends that a student will have on social networking. So 201 friends on social networking. But here's what's really interesting is that not only do they have friends on social networking, but 65% said they had a relational experience on social networking that made them feel good about themselves. So think about that. So kids are now being affirmed through social networking, and it's really becoming for them a viable way of having a relationship. We also know that 58% feel closer to their friends as a result of social networking. So again, it's interesting that true relationships, real relationships, in their opinion, are being built via social networking. And then finally, 62% of parents are friends with their kids on social networking. And this may be for a multitude of reasons. Some of those reasons may be just wanting to keep up, see what's going on in their kids' lives. But we also know that some parents are actually parenting via social networking, building relationships with their kids via social networking. So it's an interesting culture to live in where it concerns relationships and the trends that are happening in the lives of our students. So let's look at education. Education, and I have some stats here from the last 12 years. Education is trending basically stagnant for the most part. And there's a graph here I'll show you. If you can see here, the trend in spending is this top line. So spending has gone from roughly $56,000 per student per year to nearly $160,000, over $160,000 actually, dollars per year. You can also see here the trend of the number of people that have been hired in education. So we see that we're actually paying more and paying more people to provide education for our students. But what we're seeing here is that in reading, math, enrollment, and science, it's flatlined for the last 12, actually since 1970. So that's 52 years. So the last 52 years, we're not seeing really any change in the quality of education as far as like students graduating with higher scores and so on. But we're seeing a tremendous amount more money put into education itself. And one of the other trends that we're also seeing in education is that, and this is common conversation among educators, is that educators are having to take on more and more of a social services type role within the classroom as well. And so I think some leaders are starting to wake up to the fact that the local church can provide some of those kinds of resources and reaching out. We're actually in the middle of, we've applied for a grant from our state, from Ohio, that was basically written to promote faith-based organizations actively getting involved in mentoring in the local schools. And so I think that education is starting to feel the pinch from having to not only educate, but also help mentor kids and help them navigate life. And so education is trending up in spending and in hiring, but flatline in terms of impact. So let's look at spirituality real quick. The trend in spirituality, and this is some research from George Barna. You might be familiar with some of this. But if we look at some of the trends that he recognized, are our students having conversations about Jesus? Now, this information only goes to 2009, but I can tell you from recent studies that I've seen, it's about the same. And that is basically this, that among Protestants and non-Protestants, among mainline and non-mainline denominations, born-again believers, born-again Christians, teens and students are relatively not sharing. The trend of sharing Christ with their friends is actually declining. We also see in terms of spirituality, as far as attending church, attending youth group, Sunday school, and so on, the trends are either flat or declining. So we're not seeing an increase in church attendance. In fact, there's a lot of conversation right now surrounding the fact that the next generation is disconnecting from the local church. We're going to address some of that in the next part. And then if we look at the other trend that he talks about is personal. So this is personal spirituality. And again, most every trend is down. The only one we see a little bit of an uptick in is in reading the Bible, not including at church. And if you look at that trend, it's basically just returning to 12-year-ago levels. So what does all this mean for us? Well, this is what George Barna says about this generation in spirituality. He says only 1/5 of 20-something, so 20% of people in their early 20s have maintained a level of spiritual activity consistent with their high school experience. And another 1/5, 19%, were never significantly reached by a Christian community of faith during their teens and have remained disconnected from the Christian faith. And so what we're seeing in this is that the teens that are reached, the vast majority of them are not staying connected. And there's another whole contingency of students that aren't even being reached. And so when we look at the collective, social media use is up, personal technology is up, education spending is up, but results are flatline. Relationships are trending cyber, and spirituality is down. And so what does this mean to us as student ministers, as student leaders and pastors and those who lead teams? What does this mean to us? What this means is that typical student ministry, so the ministries where we are expecting them to come to us, where we, in those settings, specifically give them a monologue, and this is a lot speaking specifically about even teen ministry. We give them a monologue. The environment's kind of spiritually sterilized. In other words, there's not a lot of room for them to bring the hurts they might be dealing with and those kinds of things, and there's an expectation that these kids are going to be spiritual and they're going to say the right thing and do the right thing. Kind of, I call it the Sunday school effect, where they're able to give the right answer, but they don't really live the right answer. And then finally, a lot of ministries are trying to be hip, cool, and relevant and really relate to the kids. And that's kind of the typical student ministries. And what we know is that that's been the environment for a very long time, for decades now. And what we're discovering is that that typical student ministry model just simply doesn't work. So it's not helping the trend. So we have a couple choices. We can either continue to do what we do, stay the same, and accept what we get, or we can change our approach for greater impact. And I believe there are some adjustments we can make to have a greater impact on this generation. And that's what I want to talk about in this next part. So 7 things that effective student ministries must do to connect with the next generation. So let's jump right into it. Number 1, we got to pursue Jesus in front of our students. What does that mean? That might sound like a no-brainer. Well, we're a church organization. Of course, we're going to do that. But here's what I mean by that, is that students want to know that they can hurt and heal. So we should be careful to never share a hurt without revealing a clear path or revealing a hurt without it revealing a clear path to healing. So what does that mean? I think there's in our world today, in our spiritual world today, there's a tendency to want to climb down into the mud with people. There's a lot of talk about ministry is messy. We got to get down in the dirty. We got to get down in the where people are living, and we got to meet them where they are. And it's absolutely accurate. We have to do that. But we have to do that with the intention to lift people out of those moments, not live in there with them, but to lift them out of those moments. And so what students want is students want to know they can share their hurt, but what they really want to know is that they can be healed. And so the greater part of this equation that we as leaders bring to the table and have to really nurture is an environment of healing and restoration and wholeness. So that's an environment where we can share our hurts. And we're not overly spiritual. We're not creating an environment where you're afraid to tell us what you're really going through. But that's not what we're going to major on. What we're going to major on is getting you healthy, getting you healed, getting you lifted out of that situation. And so, number one, students want to know that they can hurt and heal. It's very important. Students also want to know that you are more advanced. So we got to be careful not to share everything. In the desire for transparency and genuineness, we have to watch that we don't share too much. It's possible to share too much of the things that we're dealing with because, quite honestly, there are some things we deal with that students just can't handle. They wouldn't understand, they can't relate, and it may cause them to not have as much confidence in our ability to lift them out. So we have to use wisdom when we're sharing the things that we're dealing with, and always come back to the triumphs that we're experiencing. So students need to hear genuine struggle out of our lives and the challenges that we're facing. It's the environment that we have to build. And again, you go back to the trend of Snapchat. What they're looking for is they want to be able to be real, but no, it's not going to be held against them. They want to know they can be real and it's going to go away. Well, in the same way, we have to build an environment of real and genuine and transparency. We have to do it in a way that we offer answers to, and our students want to know that we're out ahead of where they are. Students also want to know that we can help, we can and will help them grow, and that kind of has to do with the last one. So we have to find a way to make the personal growth of our students our number one goal. So their personal spiritual growth becomes our number one focus. So they want to know that we can and will help them grow. Here's what students need. Students need solid biblical practical answers to questions they have never had to ask. I really want to kind of focus on that last line there. It's highlighted that they have never had to ask. And what we have to realize is that we've been a lot of the places that they've been. And quite honestly, in some instances, we haven't been in situations that they have been in. But in our pursuit of Christ and us living Jesus out loud in front of them, we've learned some things about how to stand in faith. And we need to always push back, point back to the Bible. I've watched a lot of student pastors minister and talk to and kind of mentor young people from a very worldly perspective, giving their opinion and their personal experiences and how they would deal with the situation and what they would say and so on. And I've actually heard a lot of those conversations have very little foundation in the Word of God. And what I mean by that is not so much that the information wasn't godly, but they didn't point back to Scripture. They didn't point back to the Bible. So if this kid follows their advice, they're just following the advice of the mentor, but they're not given that tool of the Bible to stand on in that moment to really have a biblical reference for how to deal with these situations in the future. And I'm convinced and convicted that as student pastors, if we're going to be effective in reaching this next generation, we've got to put the Word of God into their hands and give them solid biblical, practical answers to questions they've never had to ask. So keep pointing back to the Bible. Number two, the second thing that we have to do is we have to engage them where they are. So where are they? Well, we have to be real about this. The attendance reality is that most students don't come to church unless they have a ride. And this is true especially of our elementary age kids and our junior high kids, and most of our senior high kids even until they get their license. But mostly our attendance is predicated on our students' ability to get a ride to the church. So that's why the trends and percentages of the student ratio of most congregations stays steady, 10 to 20%, 10% being the average, 20% being the high threshold. So the reason that is because they're dependent on other people to bring them. And so we have to have an attendance reality check sometimes to say, if we're really measuring our growth only in attendance, there's a cap on what we can expect unless we're going to go to extraordinary means to bring in more. So where are our students? So if our students are only coming because they have a ride, then where are they otherwise? Well, we know 33% of the time they're in school, 33% of the time they're asleep, 12.5% of the time they're at home playing video games, doing homework, 6.25% of the time they're in sports-related activities, and then 2.5% of the time they're actually in church. So a very small percentage of their reality is spent in a place where they can only arrive if they have a ride. So we have to just kind of almost take a snapshot. So if we want to engage them where they are, then we have to get to where they are. And I recognize that these numbers, if you're good at math, don't add up to 100%. But there's some things that were more about activities than locations that I didn't include in that list. So we have to go where they are. So how do we do that? I believe one of the greatest ways we can do that is to target our schools. So by that, I mean, find a way to get involved in your student's local school. What does it do? It demonstrates genuine interest. So you're showing the students, I really do care about your reality, and your school is 33% of your reality. It helps you to connect with their peers. So their friends are also seeing, hey, here's a spiritual mentor that really cares about my friend, and give you a chance to connect with their maybe non-believing peers. Also influences the leaders of the schools, especially if you go in with a heart to say, we're here to serve you. And so how do you do that? Well, there are several simple ways. Drop in for lunch, be steady, coming in for lunch, host a study group. And by study group, I mean school study, like a mentoring or a helping with their schoolwork or their academics. Engage them in mentoring. So some students may be dealing with some hard life issues and they need some mentoring. And we're finding a lot of success right now in our local schools with this approach. We've gone in to say, hey, we have no agenda. We're here to help you. And the schools have really opened their arms to us and have said, come on in. And right now, one of the things that we're looking at is launching a very strong mentoring process that if you're interested in, we'd love to share with you what that looks like and how we're going to launch out into that. And that we encourage to avoid Bible studies at least at first. Is what we want our students to know is that we're there for them and that we're not coming in with an agenda or trying to have church in the school. We want to build relationship and be where they are. And then those things will naturally happen. Those conversations are going to come up and the opportunity to start an official study of the word will happen. Let it happen naturally. Number 3, not only engage them where they are, we need to engage them while they are young. This is by far, in my opinion, one of the most important shifts that we need to make in student ministries across the board. And that's why we're so passionate about the KUEST curriculum and its impact. Engaging them. So we understand that influencing, the best time to influence anything is while it is still unformed. So just take a look at this picture real quick. Fixing this tree. Look at that tree, all crooked, bent over. Fixing this tree only requires this. So if we get into the early stages of this tree's life, we can help it to avoid this situation, being crooked, bent out of shape, headed in the wrong direction, all of the above, just by simply applying a little bit of direction early on in its life. And the same thing is true where it concerns our students. The earlier we can begin to reach them and instill the godly principles and the things that they need to shape their reality, the more it's going to hold as they get older. Research plays that out, just bears that out. It's undeniable. And so we engage them. We pour our efforts and resources into the greatest area of impact. In fact, I wish I would have included one more word in this slide. Pour your best efforts and resources into the greatest area of impact. And what area of impact is that? It is with our youngest. It's with the elementary age students, and as young as you can get back and start impacting them early. Also, then number 4, we want to engage the home to strengthen the family. I'm convinced more and more that the family, strong families, is the role that the church plays in modern society. So while there are a lot of organizations that can meet physical needs and emotional needs and people and even people groups, I believe that the local church, one of the greatest mandates of the local church is to build strong families. And if we have strong families as a foundation in our society, then a lot of issues get taken care of that today billions of dollars are being poured into. So what do? We engage the home. I'm convinced, I think it's actually makes a lot of sense that student ministries would be the ones who promote parenting classes, because we understand the impact this has on our students. Imagine how much stronger and healthy our students are if their families are healthy and their homes are healthy. So I really believe this is one of the things that student ministries can and should take on as a priority in what we offer our ministries as parenting classes. We also believe that providing resources, podcasts, videos, books, and so on parenting and healthy homes is a huge way to help families grow. But whatever and however the approach, and even including date night fundraisers, think about it. Raise money for your student ministry and give mom and dad some time to build their healthy relationship. Maybe they take some of your podcasts or materials and go out and spend time looking at them while you're watching the kids and raising money for your student ministries. It's a real win-win situation, with actually the emphasis being on building strong families. So whatever it is, actively, intentionally, and consistently engage the home. And I know that sometimes we offer printouts, especially this is true in kids ministry. We'll offer printouts of what we talked about today, and we'll encourage mom and dad, hey, take this home. There's some questions here you can ask your kids and get a conversation going. I think we need to take that maybe to the next level step, which would include this, because most typically we get those too. Pastor Kathy and I get those. We in the past we've gotten them, and sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't. What if we were to engage the parents and ask them, what resource would help you teach your kids the same things that we're teaching here? What could we put in your hands that you actually would use to help reinforce the teachings that we're teaching them here at church in the home? And let them give us some feedback on what that might look like. And then the next step would be, so if we gave you that, would you commit to using it and reporting back to us on how it's going? That gives us a clear measurement of whether or not the resource is working, and possibly just save us a lot of time and effort and resources in developing something that's not going to be used. So really think about how can we actively, intentionally, consistently engage the home. Number 5, integrate student leadership. I believe that our student leadership should be a community. We need to establish a leadership community. In other words, our teen leaders and our children's leaders should be collaborating on a consistent basis. And as we look at that, we share our values, we share our training, and we share our input. And this is something that, again, we've had good success with here at Family Life Church, and establishing what we call equip sessions. And Brittany and Jason have been a big part of that, establishing the equip sessions where all of student ministries come together and we share the common value, we share the common training, and we share the common input and strategies to help us become a leadership community. Also, effective teen leaders take an active interest in ministry to kids. So we want to make sure that as teen leaders, we are involved in what's happening in our younger student ministries, because those are the kids that are coming up that we're going to continue to serve. Effective kids leaders make a continuous investment in kids. So they follow the kid and track them throughout their education continuum, their student ministries continuum. Number 6, we need to maintain a healthy perspective of our ministries. So we got to just be healthy about how we think about it. Be realistic about the impact of your ministry. What's actually happening? A lot of times we want to try to emphasize it. We want to talk about how we overhype it. But let's be realistic, because that's going to put us in the best position to be effective. So get very serious about understanding how your ministry does impact your students. So embrace the way, in other words, that your ministry matters. How's your ministry matter? The way your ministry matters is going to be different than the way our ministry matters, because it's going to be specific to your culture, to the culture of your church, even the culture of your region. And the way that your ministry needs to matter is going to be different from one to the next. So we have to embrace the way it matters and not necessarily look out at other ministries and say, that's what we want to be like. Well, we need to be who we need to be to have the greatest impact on the students God's entrusted to us. So embrace that. So a healthy perspective will do a few things. It will lighten the load. So it'll take off undue pressure. things that we don't need to feel pressure to try to create and be and do. It'll lighten that load. Also, it'll sharpen our focus. It'll help us really get focused on what matters most to us, which is going to help to enhance our effectiveness. We're going to become more effective as we get more focused on what matters, why we matter, and embracing that. All right, and then number 7, be students of student ministry. What does this mean? Abandon a broken model. If the model that we're working in doesn't work, as I think one of our ex-US presidents said at one time, if the horse is dead, dismount. If it's not working, change it up. Do something different. This is the way we say it here all the time. Unless something changes, everything stays the same. So we can't expect to keep doing the same things and getting different results. If it's broken, let's get a different model. So effective student ministries study the trends, so they stay on top of what's going on and trending for their students. They pursue effectiveness. They focus on and major on what matters, and they understand the seasons that they're in. Let me share a scripture with you that Jesus shared, and you're probably familiar with this, Matthew 16:2-3. He says this to the religious leaders. He says, you know the saying, red sky at night means fair weather tomorrow. Red sky in the morning means foul weather all day. You know how to interpret the weather signs in the sky, but you don't know how to interpret the signs of the times. So what was he saying to them? I believe what he was saying is, you guys are smart. I mean, you know stuff. You have a lot of knowledge, and you understand the patterns of how the weather works. The problem is you're not interpreting that in a way that has an impact on people. In other words, you know those things, and you're only using that knowledge for your own gain so that people will think that you're great, that you're something. But I believe that Jesus in this calls us to a greater good, and that is to take what we've learned, the things that we've experienced. It's why I'm so passionate about the collaborative. I believe there's so much more we can gain from crosstalk, getting together and figuring it out. And then once we get that information, we apply it in a way that fits our times. And so we have to embrace the trends that we're in. We have to embrace these things that our students are dealing with. The fact that their relationships are trending cyber. It's a big deal that relationship face-to-face is becoming less and less important in terms of gaining personal significance from relationships. So in other words, our kids don't have to be face-to-face anymore to get the affirmation they need for who they are. They're getting that via the internet, via social networking. Well, if we don't understand that and we don't engage that, then we aren't interpreting the signs of the times. We're not properly using the knowledge we have to engage them and help to continue to steer them. And so I believe that Jesus gives us a heads up here to say, hey, look, I've given you a lot of knowledge. Now you need to understand how to apply it where you are in the times that you're in. So this is a bonus thought. So we need to be students of student ministries, and this is a bonus one. This is actually number 8, but it's bonus. Measure your success. I can't emphasize that enough. We've got to find a way to know. Measuring basically says, how do we know we are succeeding? How will you know when you've done what is in your heart to do? How will you know you've succeeded? What we have to be careful of is that measurement is more than a feeling. So it's not just, yeah, that felt like a good night last night, or it feels like our kids are really getting it, or it feels like they're having a good time. That's really difficult to measure. We want to be able to measure. So your measurements, what you measure, is going to be determined by what matters to you. So you're going to measure what matters. So once you get set on and you get clear about what matters for your ministry, then you've got to set up a way to measure what matters so you know that it's working. Then you can make tweaks and adjustments from there with those solid measurements. And if you think about it, everything I shared in the first half of this thought was all measurements. Measuring trends, measuring education, measuring spirituality, and doing it in a way that we can actually measure the physical results, and we can then make adjustments based on what we see there. So here are the 7/8 things that effective student ministries do to reach students today. They pursue Jesus in front of their students. They engage them where they are. They engage them while they're young. They engage the home. They integrate student leadership. They maintain a healthy perspective of their ministry. They are students of student ministry, and they measure their success. And so with that, what I would love to do is just open up the conversation. questions, thoughts that you have, things that hit you that you'd like to share with everybody else. And so you can unmute your microphones and we'd love to have that conversation right now.